Many employees feel frustrated or discouraged after reporting harassment because they may feel that HR didn't take their complaint seriously or that they didn't do anything. They just swept it under the rug. And so they're totally defeated and frustrated because nothing happened. Usually, toxic work cultures will lead an employee to contact HR to see if they can get some remedial action or someone to step in and stop what's going on in the workplace. Workplace harassment typically looks like bullying, or another term is mobbing, where a group of employees might be ganging up on another employee, making that employee feel bad, making that employee feel isolated, excluded, or they're just making offensive or derogatory comments toward that employee. That would be workplace harassment. When an employee reports harassment to HR, they're usually hoping that the harassment stops, that HR steps in, becomes their champion or their advocate, and makes the conduct stop. When an employee reports harassment, an HR representative is supposed to look into the allegations, launch an investigation, and it needs to be fair and timely. They should not sweep those allegations under the rug and just dismiss the employee, which sometimes happens. An employer has a responsibility to investigate harassment complaints. If an employee comes forward and they reasonably believe that they're being harassed, the employer has an obligation to look into those allegations, to investigate. An investigation needs to be conducted by a neutral decision maker. So HR can look into it, but they need to be neutral. We can't have a biased decision being made. Otherwise, it's not fair. And now the employee has an argument that their complaint was not properly investigated and the conduct may still be going on, so there's no remedial action taken by the employer. A proper investigation into a harassment complaint should be looking at the allegations that are being made. So it requires interviewing the person that made the complaint and getting a full detailed picture of what was going on or what they're alleging, what happened in the workplace, and then also interviewing the accused, because the person that's being accused of harassment also has an opportunity or should have an opportunity to defend themselves or give their side of the story. You can't get a full picture of what's going on in the workplace unless you look at everything involved. And it also may include talking to witnesses, so other coworkers, because you want to make sure that you're getting all the information you need while still maintaining confidentiality for that person that made the complaint initially. So the person that came in and made the complaint, HR will listen, take notes, document what happened, and then launch an investigation. So they're going to go look at what actually happened. They might visit the location where the employees work. They are going to talk to the witnesses involved, also talk to the accused, give someone an opportunity to defend themselves if necessary. If HR is getting involved, they're going to be asking questions and really looking into the details of what the complaint started with. When HR ignores a harassment complaint, they usually just sweep it under the rug. They're not going to look into it. They're not going to ask questions. They're not going to interview anyone. They're just going to simply do nothing, not really follow up with what was alleged. And an employee can tell because nothing changes. They still go back to work and the environment is still the same. Common ways that an HR rep may minimize an employee's complaint is excusing the behavior, making excuses for what's actually going on in the workplace, or for excuses for the individual that is actually engaging in the harassment. They'll minimize it and say, oh, I don't really see it that way, or just being more dismissive as opposed to proactive. An employer might fail to properly address a harassment complaint because they simply just don't believe the employee that's reporting it, or they don't feel like anything's going on, or they don't want to have to fire another individual because this employee came forward and made harassment allegations against a coworker. Maybe the employer doesn't want to fire that employee, and so they simply just dismiss it. Many employers don't want to fire the harasser. We see it all the time. And it could be because that individual is a great employee. They do their job well. They've been with the company for years. They're the boss's best friend. They're the boss's family member. There are a number of different reasons why an employer may not fire the harasser, but does it make it okay? Probably not. We see many cases arising out of an employer not taking any steps to be proactive with a harassment complaint. They simply don't do anything. And this is definitely a liability for an employer because if they're not taking the complaint seriously and they don't launch an investigation, then they'll likely have a lawsuit or potential claims being alleged against them that result in liability for that employer. An employer can be held responsible if the harassment continues after the employee reported the harassment. So there's a continuing obligation to take remedial action. There's a claim that can be made against employers for failing to take remedial action to stop harassment or discrimination. So you're still on the hook. There could still be liability if you don't take action when you're the employer who receives a harassment complaint. Reporting harassment helps protect employees legally because we need that complaint to be made. An employer needs to be put on notice when harassment is taking place in the workplace because if they don't know, they're likely not going to do anything. So once the employee makes the complaint, now the employer can step up and either do the right thing and correct the conduct, or they may do the wrong thing, ignore it, and now the employee may have a cause of action for harassment that they can pursue. Employees are often discouraged from reporting harassment because they worry about retaliation, and that's a real thing. They should be worried because an employer may retaliate against an employee who comes forward with a harassment complaint, but it's okay. Because if an employer does retaliate against that employee, then there's remedies. Talk to a lawyer, file a complaint with the Civil Rights Department or the EEOC. There are outlets that will help that employee if they do suffer retaliation because they made a complaint. Some forms of retaliation that can happen to an employee after they file a harassment complaint include being excessively scrutinized right after you make that complaint, or your schedule changes, you're taken off the schedule. You might be disciplined. You might get a write-up right after you make that harassment complaint. Worst case scenario, the employer fires the employee for making that harassment complaint. If an employee feels that HR is ignoring their complaint for harassment, they should start documenting everything. They should take notes, keep a journal of what's happening every day in the workplace, quotes. If they are being verbally harassed by a coworker, write down the quotes and send in your complaints in writing. So when you make a complaint to HR, do it in writing. That creates a paper trail. And then if there's any text messages, save those. You want to create that paper trail to support your claims if you feel like you're being harassed in the workplace. Types of evidence that can support a harassment complaint include quoting. So if someone's making derogatory or offensive comments to you, write them down. That way we can quote those comments if we pursue an action against the employer. Or take notes, write emails, send text messages, put it in writing in real time so that way we can support your allegations if we have to move a case forward. An employee should keep copies of their communications with HR. If you write it, keep it because we may need that if we pursue a claim against an employer. So employees need to be mindful that if they are retaliated against for making a harassment complaint, then if they get fired, they will likely lose access to all of their emails. So you lose that upper hand with evidence. So it's important to make sure that you are documenting what you're experiencing in real time so that you have something to support what you're alleging. So if you make complaints, write those. And keep those. Keep copies of what your complaints are. That way we can use those and say, no, this really did happen. Just in case you lose that access and you'll have that ability to pull out those emails that you were sending to HR. So you want to make sure you're maintaining your information as well. I think it's important for employees to know that they need to document what they're experiencing because if they don't document, then the employer is going to likely say it never happened or they didn't know. We see that a lot. Oh, well, we didn't know. So if they're documenting and they're maintaining those records, then we can show that the employer had notice and they still failed to take action. If an employee feels that they're being retaliated against because they made a harassment complaint, they should document that. They should make another complaint to the employer or HR saying, I feel like I'm being retaliated against simply because I made this harassment complaint. Document it first, call a lawyer second, and then see what happens from there. When I say document a complaint regarding feeling retaliated against for making a harassment complaint, what I mean is write out your complaint, write out what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and send it in. Send it into management or HR, but put it in writing. Because if you feel like you're being retaliated against, make the employer address that. Make them take remedial action. Make them step up and be your advocate. If they don't, then you might have a claim for retaliation. There are situations when employees should report a harassment complaint outside of the company. However, they need to do that first. An employee should report harassment to the company first because you want to put the company on notice. You want to see what they do and if they do anything to protect you. If they do, that's fantastic. That's a good employer. If they don't, then you might have to take steps outside of reporting to the company and move to talking to an attorney or reporting to the Civil Rights Department or the EEOC. If an employee reports harassment and nothing's done, or they suffer retaliation, meaning they're fired, demoted, something happens at work that's adverse, they should consider talking to an employment law attorney. If HR ignores a harassment complaint, an attorney can help. Typically, they can guide an employee on what to do next or help them with filing their complaint with the Civil Rights Department or the EEOC, or be that support to help them take steps necessary to be proactive and continue advocating for their rights in the workplace. And then if the employer still fails to take that remedial action, an employment attorney is the best resource on what to do next. If harassment continues in the workplace and the employer fails to take any action to stop it, then an employee can file a complaint with the Civil Rights Department or the EEOC. They will investigate the complaint and see if there's merit so that the employee may possibly bring a lawsuit against that employer for harassment. If an employee feels like their employer is not taking their harassment complaint seriously, then they should continue making those complaints. Don't stop. Don't be silent. That's what the employer wants. Speak up, continue to speak up, and if they still don't do anything, go talk to an attorney. Get some advice so you know what to do next. If an employee is being harassed at work, they have rights. There are anti-harassment laws that protect employees. So speak up. Make your complaint. You're going to be protected as long as you speak up, make the complaint, and call your employer out on what's going on. Put them on notice. If an employee reports harassment in the workplace, they are protected legally. If they reasonably believe that they are being harassed and they make this complaint, they're protected from retaliation. So if an employee is fired because of this, it's time to call a lawyer.